Welcome back to Conservative American Predictions. Tonight I'm going to be doing a video about Kamala Harris's best case scenario in the 2024 presidential election against Donald Trump. And the map that I have filled out so far, these are states that are above 12 points for either side. The darkest shade is states that are 15 points and above, and then the lighter shade is between 12 and 15, and these are the safe and very safe states, and that gives Donald Trump 106 starting electoral votes and Kamala Harris 209. So moving on beyond this point, we're going to go to the more toss-up, closer states in this scenario. These are states under 12 points, and I'm going to fill out Kamala Harris's likely states first. Those are the states of Minnesota, Nebraska's 2nd District, Maine at large, and New Hampshire. So those are Kamala's likely states. Those put her at 226 electoral votes, and I'm going to go ahead and briefly talk about them. So in Nebraska's 2nd in 2020, as you can see, Joe Biden won it by about 6.5 points. And I think that in a best case scenario, you could see suburban voters shift even more to the left. In this scenario, Trump really turns them off with some of his just kind of anti-generic traditional Republican talking points. This is going to anger some of the ex-Republican base, and they could go to Harris in this election. And this would shift districts like Nebraska 2nd and states as a whole to the left. So Nebraska 2nd, best case, I think is about D+8. And then Minnesota, I think best case scenario is about D+8 to 9. Kamala might still even lose some ground in the working class areas of the state, but where she makes it up is the Minneapolis suburbs and the urban areas inside of Minneapolis. She could definitely make the state a bit more Democrat, and some third-party candidates like Kennedy could take more votes from Trump in this scenario, especially in more working-class heavy states. And then after this, New Hampshire. This is a state that voted for Biden by about 7.5. I think in a best-case scenario, you'd see it vote for Kamala by about 10. She could definitely just do better here. This is a very anti-Trump state. It's not a very pro-Kamala state. It's just very anti-Trump. Same thing with Maine, except it's more so a working-class state, and Trump is a bit of a better candidate here. But in a best-case scenario, you could still see Kamala win it by about 9 points. She doesn't have a lot of demographics she can gain with, but she can hold Biden's margin, in my opinion, in a best-case scenario. And now we get to Donald Trump's likely states, and there are quite a few of these. Alaska, Kansas, Nebraska's 1st District, Iowa, Ohio, Florida, and South Carolina. Also, Maine 2nd, I'll also throw in here. It's kind of between the lean and likely columns. So I'll start with Alaska. The state voted for Trump by about 10. In a best case scenario, I think it's about R+7. So Kamala is a worse candidate than Biden here, in my opinion, but she still has a decent chance of doing all right here. This is if Kennedy takes a lot of votes in the first round, and maybe it does go to a second round, and then all of the Kennedy voters switch over to Harris. So this is a best case in that scenario. And then out of Kansas, this is a Trump plus 14.5 point state in 2020. In 2024, again, the suburb shifting to the left and Kennedy on the ballot could give Trump this state by only 10 to 11 points. And then same thing with Nebraska's 1st, basically same exact scenario, about 10 to 11 points for Trump, in my opinion. Then after this, Iowa, I think this in a best case scenario is Trump plus probably 8. He holds about the exact same margin as 2020. There's not really a lot of room for Kamala to gain. She maybe gains in some of the suburban areas, but then Trump gains in some of the working class areas. Ohio, same thing, maybe R+7 to 8, so maybe a little bit of a shift to the left, but it would still be a fairly decent win for Trump, and he would be able to maybe even improve in some of the working class areas. He would just lose ground in some urban and suburban areas. And then, of course, South Carolina, a very traditional Republican state, is about Trump plus 12 in 2020. And with Kamala on the ballot, she could definitely improve in some African-American areas. It would be hard to improve, get more vote out that wasn't already gotten in 2020, but there is still some ground to gain. And you could also see some disaffected Republicans just not vote for Trump, making the state much closer by about 7 to 8 points. And then in Florida, best case scenario is Trump plus 5 to 6. Even in this scenario, he does win it by a likely margin. The state is just too far gone for Democrats, and there isn't a lot of demographics for Kamala to improve with, so about a 5 to 6 point win. And then Maine 2nd, also a 5 to 6 point win. Trump would do well here still. It's just Kennedy would hurt him enough to where it drops to almost a lean margin, but still a likely win for Trump. So after this puts Kamala at 226 electoral votes and Donald Trump at 179. So now we get to the lean and tilt states, and I'm going to fill out the highest lean states first. The highest lean state, in my opinion, would be the state of Wisconsin for Kamala Harris at about 4 points. So I do have Kamala winning Wisconsin as of now, but in a best case scenario, she could win it by upwards of 4, and this would solely be because of her large shifts in urban and suburban areas in the state. She could do better in Waukesha County. She could do better in Milwaukee. She could do better in Madison, Wisconsin. She could do better in a lot of urban and suburban places, even if Trump improves a little in the working class areas. But Kennedy would probably keep him from doing that, so it would keep the state shifting to the left, and it would vote for Kamala by a fairly decisive margin. And then after this, the state of Texas, I'll give to Trump by about 3 to 4 points in a best case scenario. Kamala would gain in suburban counties like Collin, Denton, and Tarrant County. She would also improve in the Austin suburbs and other major cities across the state. However, Trump would still probably gain in the heavily Latino Rio Grande and southern Texas part of the state. However, it wouldn't be enough to counter this, and it would be about an R plus 3 to 4 state in a best case for Kamala Harris. And then after this, Michigan, I think, is about D plus 3 to 4 in a best case scenario. Kamala improves in the Kent County area, Grand Rapids. She improves in the Detroit area, gets more African American voters out. And same thing with the working class in Wisconsin. Maybe Kennedy keeps Trump from improving there. And, the rural, same thing. So Kamala manages to keep progressives and Arab voters in line, and this gives her the state by a lean margin. And then same thing with Pennsylvania, and this would put her at 270 electoral votes, so she would win the election. But best case, she could win the state by about 3 to 4 points. Basically the same reasons as Wisconsin and Michigan. Again, getting more voters out in the Philly areas, getting progressives to stay in line, and of course, Kennedy keeps the white working class from shifting further to the right. And then Georgia, also a probably 3 to 4 point win, best case scenario. She definitely improves in the Atlanta area. There's not a lot of room to gain there, as in 2020. Biden got about all the voters out that he could. However, there is still a bit of room to gain, and there is still a bit of room that she could improve on. And especially in the Georgia or at the Atlanta suburbs, there's room to gain. And then also in the Savannah area part of the state, in the kind of the southeast, she could still gain there. So another win for Kamala. And then the last lean state, the state of Nevada, I think is a lean state for Kamala, about 1 or 2 points. I think that she would do worse than Biden, but she would improve probably in Washoe County. It would just be in Clark County that she loses off on. Suburban voters, women, and minorities she could do better with, except for the Latino vote. I think that Trump would still improve here, and that's why he would do better in Clark County. However, he would still lose the state. And then after this, we get down to the tilt states, and these are the states that I think would go basically either way. So, I'm going to throw Arizona in the lean column too, because let's just say hypothetically her VP candidate helps her here. I think she could maybe lock this state up to being a lean margin. I think it's about a 1 point win for Kamala exactly. Mark Kelly basically has been ruled out because he withdrew himself from being the VP. But a good VP could potentially help her here. So let's just say in the best case she wins it by just over 1, gaining ground in Maricopa, gaining ground among the suburban voters of the state, maybe losing a bit of ground among Latino voters, but as a whole still improving. And then the last state is North Carolina, and in a best case scenario for Kamala Harris, I do think she would win the state. I think it would be very narrow, but she would still be able to carry the state, flipping it from 2020 and actually improving on Joe Biden's electoral votes. So she would win it by about 0.5%, in my opinion, in this scenario. I think she would do very well with African American voters, and she would improve in suburban areas, even if she would drop off in some of the northeastern parts of the state, which are very heavily working class parts of the state, that actually did shift to the right in 2020 as well. So this is how I see the map at a best case scenario for Kamala. I don't really think this happens as of now, as I do have Donald Trump still winning the election, but it is possible that Kamala wins, and I think this is the ceiling for Kamala. So Trump does have a fairly high ceiling as well. So I think a result in between those two is very reasonable. It's probably what's going to happen, almost definitely what's going to happen. I'd say there's over a 99% chance that it's between these two scenarios that I did in the two last videos, the best case for each candidate. I hope you did enjoy, though. Comment down below who you think is going to win the election. Comment who or what you think a Kamala landslide or a best case would look like. And again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.